Welcome to Product Rising. I'm Elizabeth Ames, the executive producer of Product Rising and the former CEO of Women in Product. At Product Rising, we focus on providing meaningful information and insightful conversations about how to succeed in product and advance your career. If you find this information helpful, please follow us and recommend us to others. For more information about Women in Product, please visit womenpm.org or join our community. Links are provided in the show notes. Today's episode is the fourth interview in our series, The Visibility Equation. This series was created and is hosted by Surbhi Gupta. With nearly 2 decades of experience driving product innovation across big tech and startups, Surbhi brings a wonderful blend of strategy, clarity, and human-centered leadership to this series. Our guest in this episode is Megh Gautam. Megh is in product leadership at Box. Prior to Box, he held a variety of product leadership roles at Crunchbase, Twilio, Dropbox, and Hearsay Systems. Megh is a speaker, author, and self-described talking head. He holds a Master's of Science degree from Stanford University and a BA in Information Technology from MIT in India. And with that, I'll turn it over to Surbhi and Megh.
Hi, Megh. Excited to have you here. Let's start with knowing you a little bit more.
Excited to be here, Surbhi. So I run the product team here at Crunchbase. Product team for us means product managers as well as designers. I spent a chunk of time at public companies like Dropbox and Twilio, and also startups as well as scale-ups. I was at Hearsay Systems, I was at BankBox. I grew up in India, and I did my master's here at Stanford.
Very interesting background. So glad to have you here. Let's start with a bold question. What's the biggest risk you have taken in your career that took you towards building more visibility?
That is such a great question. And I commend you for starting off with like a bold question. It really sets the tone well. I think I'll go back to one of my prior CEOs always used to say that if there's a thing that you are working on, you should be able to bet your paycheck on it. So it has to be that significant that you are willing to put a lot of conviction behind it. And it's not literally that, but it's like having the conviction to say, hey, yeah, I'm going to commit myself to it. So that has really morphed my sort of perception across the board, where some of the biggest risks that people can take are to run 0 to 1 products. And I've almost like ran towards that particular problem, and it's just paid outsized dividends over time. So now I think of the time in a way that you have to maximize your learning. So running into risks, which are inherently very ambiguous, is a good thing for your career. B, I think it uniquely suits people for this new AI era where everything is in flux. So I credit him a lot for sparking that particular conversation.
Super interesting. I'm guessing you joined Crunchbase. You're helping other startup founders.
Yeah, that's exactly it. For Crunchbase, we pivoted and we basically entered the AI era with our data. And that was a real like shift in terms of both perception as well as use of the product, which is you're not just here to get an answer to a single query. We are trying to understand what your question behind the question is.
Share a bit more on what's latest that you are doing. Yeah, love to know.
So last quarter or a few months ago, we basically released Crunchbase AI, which was basically taking all of the goodness of the Crunchbase data, packaging it up with our predictions as well as insights. So if you logged into the platform sometime in Feb and you log in today, it's going to be a totally different experience. So we try to make things easier. And our principles were like, the barrier to entry should be low. We should expose all of the goodness that our data has to offer. And we should solve real customer problems. So for founders, it could be who are we getting funding from? Right? Like who should we target for our next fundraise? For investors, it's the converse, right? Like, which is what startups make the most sense given our thesis. And it's available both on UI. So if you go to crunchbase.com and in our API as well. So like that's the journey to move everything to be AI centric, AI first, but it's not like a bandwagon we are hopping on. We've been using sort of the uh, old school machine learning algorithms for forever.
This is interesting. I haven't logged in, but I am curious to check. I will after this for sure.
Totally try it out.
Yeah. Hmm. So tell me, in your journey, how much do you believe in building professional visibility actively, or just do the right thing and it will come in, especially given the competitive world where we live today? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a great question. I generally do think you need to talk a little bit more about what you're doing. A, it helps you clarify your thinking, and B, it's kind of like the general sort of sentiment across the board has been to go talk a little bit more about it. I think the line is, where is it self-promotion versus company promotion versus just, and I think that's what a lot of people get wrong. Like if you've been on LinkedIn today or any other day, I think you would probably attest to that. But there's just a lot that you can share in terms of the challenges and the learnings that you've had, and it's been a thing that I have firmly become an advocate of in the last, call it like 3 to 4 years. Prior to that, it was always like karmic, right? Like if you do the right thing, things will come. But I don't think that's quite how it works.
It has to be intentional effort if you want to make it big. Share something here. How did you do it? What's your journey like?
For me, a lot of it was so the context, which is going to be very different, right? Um, it was a lot of like trying to figure out what the problem is, and there were problems that were not endemic across the industry. It wasn't like AI was sort of taking over, which is the case right now, or that broadcasting about your professional achievements was the norm. So what I did was try to get a lot of reps in small groups and try to get advice from people who have either done this before or have been on a journey that sort of is like 3 to 5 years ahead of you. And that gives you more of the context that you can then talk about. So start by explaining the things you do, because even if you think it is boring or no one will be interested, I guarantee you there's an audience for it. So a lot of that was like 90% of it was just getting over the fact that you have to think that the work that you are doing is interesting. And if you think it is not interesting, or if it's in a space that's not great, then you have to find angles that make it interesting. And I think that is more than half or the majority of the battle. Because once you do that, applying it across like conferences, small groups, coaching sessions is pretty trivial, especially now with the barrier to entry on posting and broadcasting is so low.
So you have to start first. Okay, I'll also add, if somebody thinks they're not doing the right thing, then they should change it. But really find that right thing and then have clarity on what you're sharing. Any actionable tips on that our listeners can start using?
For sure. Back in the days, a very intentional thing I did was to write on the company blog, like, here's the thing we shipped. It's a very easy way to have guardrails around what you're doing. And that's long form. It helps clarify your thinking. It helps you do a lot more sort of customer-centric thinking instead of being more inside out. And you have help. And like you'll have sort of marketing folks that you can ping ideas off of. Then the next great investment is like webinars, which is basically like you're trying to get direct contact with your customers. You're explaining a lot more. And that's all in the sandbox of your company. And like, so it's not a broad audience and sort of all of that. But I think the jump to here's my personal brand is going to be a little bit more of an intentional sort of a roundabout journey, because think of yourself as the product and the wide professional network as the audience. You have to find your own product market fit, right? Like, so for a while, it's if I built compliance software, compliance people would be the ones who would find me the most interesting. So like, let's go find audiences there. Versus like trying to be the social person, if that's not a thing that you've ever kind of worked with. So it's a lot of iteration, it's a lot of reps, it's a lot of consistency. And I would focus across the board. Like there's video, there's long form, And then there's in person. I get the most joy out of in person, but you can't do them forever. And the lowest effort is sort of long form blogs and content, which is the lowest effort, but also like you just have to be consistent and you have to make sure that things are lining. It's not just here's a random thing that I thought about that I want to post.
So true. So what was your passion? Where did you start? Like, as you said, that there has to be a product market fit and something you're good at. So what do we don't know about Megh when you started, and what is your future vision on what you want to be known for?
It's so I don't think it has been figured out yet. It's all still a journey, which is fine. But these days, I find the spare time and the stuff that you are doing at work is all more of the same. Right? Like you're looking at the new advances in the AI models or the new pricing models that have been introduced by the other companies. You're trying to see how you can adapt that at work or if that is at all relevant to you. And I find this time to be very, very interesting and very different from the past times that at least I have been in the Valley, where everything is moving so fast. Everyone's trying to figure things out and there's information that is abundantly available. The problem then becomes selection. Right? Like, what are the ideas that you run with? And you basically charter your team to go for. So at the end of the day, it's just judgment, right? Like you're building judgment and you're building discernment. And that's the two areas which I think are the most critical for people to understand that, hey, this is a skill that you can develop over time. And that's ultimately what I would like to be known for.
Interesting. So that's a good choice. Megh, you have also touched upon a few minutes ago about just doing the good karma and weaving it to that versus being intentional about it. So what was the pivotal moment in your career or life that changed your belief?
I think a lot of it was seeing how others interact. Like for the life of me, I don't understand why people put third person voice. You're like, hey, Surbhi Gupta is an XYZ in your own profile. I was like, it is your profile. What else would I be looking for?
I don't know. I would love to know.
Yeah. And a lot of that is like, it's just very foreign. So I couldn't relate to that. So I couldn't do it. And then I was like, I don't think this is for me. But then as like two things happened, right? Professional voices became a lot more conversational. And that was like, yes, this is interesting. Right? Like you can engage, there's value here. I want to talk about this in my own sort of personal voice. And two was, it became clear that there are more people who are facing the same problem that you are. And so with those two particular trends sort of converging, right? Now it became important. It was almost like it is part of your job description to go evangelize what you're doing. The other like macro trend, which is helpful, is like go find the audience before you build the product. It is much more applicable towards startup founders, but that led to this entire kind of mind shift of like, you have to talk about the thing, even if the product itself is going to get there past the time that you've promised, basically. So all of that led to like, now it's a very important channel. And it's not just a marketing awareness channel, it's also a distribution channel. So I think that like those three things is how I think about it. It's like it's integral to the job. It's not an also thing that I do on the side.
What you're alluding to is like in context of building personal brand and visibility. You're doing the good work and you're thinking, if I'm doing something good, I'm going to be in the limelight. Versus you're saying being more intentional is how we are doing it for product, just thinking ourselves as product, and then use this framework that you've shared.
That's exactly it. I think there's a lot of people who are like, they want to shill a service, right? Like there's the coaching service or sort of something. But what helped me write or post a lot more was with the intention of learning. It's like, I want to condense the thing I've done into an easy to understand thing, and here it is. And that just gives you a lot of reps, which you would not get otherwise.
So writing has been your super.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. How did you start? Was there any, I should not do right now, it's not the right moment, maybe I need to be knowing a little bit more to be perfect? Did you have any inhibitions, and how did you overcome?
So I've had probably a decade full of inhibitions where I was just like, I don't think any of this, like, I don't think anyone will listen to me. I don't think this is useful. I don't think people will find it helpful. But I think as you just keep doing it, it becomes part of your sort of habit. And I think it's all about jumping past the habit point where you're like, hey, I'm going to talk about this one thing. And I hope this is helpful for some people. But if it's not, it's fine. I will get another shot in 2 days. And you see some people doing it really, really well, where they're just like, hey, I'll be consistent. And I know because I'm consistent, the quality may not be the same bar, but at least I'm getting the reps in. I think this is the story that Thomas Tungoods at Redpoint, now at Theory, was about. It's like every day at 10:30 a.m. or I think it was 11 a.m., there would be like a newsletter blog, and his consistency is just phenomenal. So like understanding that and knowing that it takes a while to get your craft right is critical. And I think it applies to making videos, it applies to speaking, but I think writing is where it helps you because you're taking the learnings for what you have done now into the next thing. So I found that really helpful.
What was the moment where you crossed the chasm, where it just like, okay, it was not resonating and then things started working out?
I think the chasm crossing happens in like certain areas where they're like, if we are trying to build awareness or we're trying to sort of change perception, then it's just a very natural thing to do. But if you are just trying to build a personal brand for something, or you're like setting up a poll which is clearly like beat, that doesn't feel great. So I'm still trying to cross the chasm on like more sorts of content, but across the board, I've found that speaking, talking to others, sort of mentoring, learning from the others who have been there, have helped massively. Like it's just been such an unlock across the board. And I think you almost always undervalue the things that you can share out loud. And so just like keeping that in the back of your head was helpful.
Did you start with the North Star? Did you know what success looks like?
I did not at all. I like it was very sort of unintentional. It was not like I want a book deal out of it or I want X, Y, or Z. It was very much like, let's try to be consistent on this front.
So, okay, that's interesting. So intentional about showing up, but leaving it to, okay, we'll see what happens.
Exactly. Because I think you can control the inputs. You just can't control the outputs. So you have to have the inputs and the bare minimum is showing up.
Were you chief product officer at Crunchbase at the time when you started?
I did it before. So I think most of it was when I was at Dropbox, because there was a lot that we were doing that was very different from what people usually associate Dropbox with. So it started off there. And then I think it has been the most sort of broadcast / engaged with in my time here. It also helped me at Crunchbase. I was running the marketing team here. So just understanding how the product and the marketing functions fit together was massively helpful.
So you joined here as the CPO or you transitioned?
Yeah.
Little bit personal question. Did professional visibility help you in getting ready for this role or not really? What was the role? Maybe I'll keep it more open. What sort of?
There was a lot of like, here's the classical product role, right? Like, which is define what audience you want to serve, what the product is, and how you want to get to it. And then as we got to the professional visibility, I wouldn't like, I've known people who, because of their professional visibility, people would DM them and then they would get an offer and then things would sort of accelerate from there. Or people have written fantastic blog posts that then lead them to like investment sort of careers. Nothing like that happened. But it's just one of the markers of social proof that you exist, you're like a thought leader in the space, and the stuff that you are doing works. So it was lower stakes than that. But I think it compounds over time, which is the more you do, the more you leave a trail of achievement, and the more you can build on top of it. So it's again controlling the inputs, right? Like I think it was at a 20, now it's gotten to maybe a 50 or a 60, and you want to keep going, and you want to keep sort of doing it both for the company as well as for yourself.
Great. That sounds interesting. And how does your role at Crunchbase, your visibility, how does it help to be even more successful? Because let's say if somebody is already quite visible and successful, and then they can help to push the company versus Crunchbase is already quite known. So how these things work together, or do they come in the way?
It's very hard for me to disentangle it, because a lot of what we have done has been this kind of net new instance of Crunchbase. You would even call it an evolution. So we have it fairly intertwined together.
I think that's the best approach. Yeah.
And I think that's probably the advice, right? Like, where if you can find a way to have the same sort of alignment across the board, it just works massively, because then you're not trying to swim against the tide. You're trying to make sure that it's a 1 + 1 = 3 situation.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay, I want to ask you, was there anything surprising that you learned about yourself through your journey of building visibility?
I think a lot of the learnings are intrinsic. It's like, hey, there is value to be had when you start building a brand, or you just start kind of talking about it. And brand building was like the last thing on my. It was more like, hey, this thing needs to be talked about for it to be successful. So it's a necessary but insufficient step on the way to a successful product. And 2 was just like making sure that you show up in ways that are unique. So you could test, you could iterate, you could basically say what landed, what sort of didn't, and then what works in an in-person thing. Like, I'm generally pretty engaged with the audience, and all of that does not translate to a podcast, as an example, or like definitely doesn't translate on sort of short form videos. So just like figuring out the kind of different tips and tricks that work across mediums has been a very like interesting journey that's continuously evolving. I think teaches me a lot more than I can teach.
Double check this. Bring up any interesting stories. Would love to listen, and I think it will be valuable for our listeners too.
So my most recent keynote was at the Gen AI conference, and we were basically talking about how an established brand evolves. So for Crunchbase to go from data to an AI-driven platform. And there was a lot of tapped-in demand from the audience, which was basically like, how might we do that? So we had like large enterprises, we had startups, and then people were trying to figure out what the right way to go around making this entire evolution was. And in many cases, these things can turn very technical. Just like, what's the stack you used? And then all of that is like a very deep dive into like your stack, your iteration, your entire philosophy. That happened in another conference like a few months ago, but I'm not the best person to go answer that question, because the audience conversation becomes very much a one-on-one with somebody who has like deep questions about the stack. But at this conference, which I was at, it was very much like, what's the guiding principle? And like, what worked, what didn't, what are the lessons learned? And I find those to be the most valuable. So I ended up like cutting short my presentation and getting into audience questions for half of the time. And we went over because there was like so much kind of tapped in demand to that. Another example is like, we were doing what I would call like a sort of pitch competition with startups. And there was a lot of demand on like, hey, how does X work on Crunchbase, et cetera, et cetera. And then what all the initial questions were on, what's the score? What's the graph? How do you know the growth prediction will work with a company? Soon as that shifted, 90% of the questions towards the latter half were around pricing and packaging, because there were startups who had still figured it out. So just like the ability to make that pivot into something that people have not thought about is the thing that gives me the most joy and interest out of it.
Thanks for sharing these insights. what do you recommend if somebody has to go through this journey? Any mind blowing kind of, okay, this was not what I expected that visibility brings in, because there could be some pros and cons to it that you would like to share and maybe give an alert to somebody?
Uh, I think starting small and starting with something that benefits both you and the organization you work for is extremely important. And I find it the best to like start writing and start clarifying your own thoughts in that world. And it could be internal comms that you start. So those I found to be particularly interesting just to get you started, because it can be very, very intimidating to be like, hey, I'm gonna post something, 2 people will like it. What's the point? Right? Like, so just not getting discouraged by that, but just understanding that there's many, many different ways of engaging with an audience.
You have touched upon writing a couple of times. I would love to know, were you always like a good writer, or as you have shared, of course, like it becomes better with the practice, but any tips on that? Especially if somebody wants to build visibility, because we are talking about visibility.
Of course. I think there's, especially in a product role, the bulk of is clarifying your ideas at the right altitude for the right audience. So for the customers, you're not going to tell them about the bugs that you fixed, right? Especially if they're a prospect. For your internal team, you want to pivot it into like, this is the high level customer demand that we want to solve with this particular customer need. So that audiencing, especially in product roles, becomes your secret sauce when you are writing. And for me, a lot of the learning that I've had has been, what are the things that resonate with me? And what are the blog posts? What are the things that I find the easiest to go understand? Because you write with the intent of being understood and with the intent of being like somebody else feeling the same things that you do. You're not writing to be like, look how amazing this like rhyme scheme is. So like a lot of my prior writing was based on, here's the philosophy. It was always too long. And then the learning that I've had over time is how to be succinct. So it's the classical, like the hard thing about hard things, and then the blogs which make the most sense. It's, I think spec writing, which is the PRDs, gives you a unique advantage into trying to do, because you have to do it to explain what the customer value / benefit is.
Interesting. You've also shared that writing is definitely like a different modality, and you are much better in real life, in keynotes, and podcasts is like in between. So what is it like in real life? If what's real Megh's personality? It's not worked out here.
Yeah, real life is, there's a lot more that you can have back and forth with. And if you have an audience, right, like there's going to be like the skeptic who's going to be asking you hard questions. There's going to be the person who really wants to lean in and understand the points you're trying to make. I think it's the energy, which is the most sort of different thing, which is you can just tap into the energy of what people are worried about, concerned about, thinking through, and then really riff into that. Like I have a firm philosophy of like, I'm not going to do the same presentation twice. Right? Like I'll change something, right? Like it'll be either the way that I talk about it or the order of the slides, because at that point it just not fun. And I want to do this to both enjoy as well as to some sort of learning. And I think the whole goal is to be as memorable as you can. Right? Like the thing is like you leave every presentation with like, here's the 3 things that you could remember if you don't remember anything else. And that I think has helped me a lot with people having recall and then coming back and saying, hey, I heard you talk, or I heard you on this podcast. Here's the 3 things you said, and I want to learn about it more. So I think that was the reason why in-person translates better. Same argument can be made across like working in person versus remote, and all of that is like the energy is just different.
How do you catch energy, and how do you choose to respond?
For me, I think the audience is the most important thing, that I can either like entertain them or educate them. And the best thing is is a mixture of the two of them. So I'll usually like have a lot of jokes. I'll talk about sort of self-deprecating stuff, which helps. And then because if you try to be like I've tried to be extremely educational, it just becomes very academic or theoretical. And then that's the stuff you really want to avoid because people just glaze over.
So what are the 3 things on professional visibility that people can take away today?
Think show up, right? Like you have to control your inputs. Start small because everything is super, super intimidating at first. And 3, honestly, is like it is such an art to find an angle. Way back when I used to work on banking APIs and like a platform that would ACH in credits and debits. And I like it, if I could give an advice to my earlier self, it would be like find the interesting thing to go talk about, because then you both have a reason to connect with someone else and you have a different way of looking at things. And I just didn't do that enough, which I think is a failure mode that a lot of early career folks get into, where they're like, I'm defined in the box that I am in, and I don't want to step out of that area.
That's what I was thinking, because you have mostly touched upon talking about things you're working on versus talk about something else,
Right.
which they are not working on because maybe they are good at it and they don't have an avenue and that can help them to be energized or just pursue some other talent like a hidden gem that is stored. Have you ever tried that?
It's a great question.
Or did I motivate you now?
Yeah. I've seen people do it really well. I've seen people who have tapped into their love of theater in like a sales kickoff training session, right? Like where they're trying to play the person who does not want the deal. But I have not tried anything associated by myself. I just find entertainment to be the best way to get your point across with like some sort of comedic input. And that's a brand I would like to cultivate. And like I think when people laugh, it's easier to sort of get your point across. And it's just the like self-deprecating humor is probably the easiest way to it. And there's rules, right? Like you don't punch down, you don't talk down to people. And it's not like just wordplay humor. It's a little bit more of like what you stand for and what the point of view is that you're trying to bring forward.
That's really awesome. It keeps the moment light and also people are always energized. What have worked for you? Any memorable things that you have shared? Do you crack it in the moment? Do you like plan it in advance?
I try as much as possible to try to be in the moment, which
Like
is
more like an improv kind of thing?
yeah.
Okay.
The thing is, like, when you do that, you are also invested in the session that you're doing. Otherwise, you're following a recipe which you've had. And this doesn't work well for everyone, right? Like I know people that I work with who would rehearse, write things down, and then talk about it so they have the perfect delivery. And for me, I have no interest in being perfect, right? Like I have an interest in enjoying myself, and I have an interest in sort of making sure the stuff I do has some value for somebody who is listening. So like that's just how the values have to match.
That is so much like me, because even for this podcast, like I don't know what is gonna be my next question on. It's because it's like you are talking and then I'm like listening. I think I just bring my curiosity.
Right.
Two, 3 things I follow: being really curious and present. So because I have been told by people that okay, many people do practice and they make it look natural, but then my mind will be like, oh, did I forget that question? Did I?
Right.
Rather than listening to what you are really saying in the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
It has its downsides, right? Like where if you do like a customer session, you're like, oh, I need to hit these points. Like try to have like rough guardrails.
Yeah. Like some points, you definitely don't want to miss, and maybe the other person is also prepared well. Sometimes I do it just for that, just to make someone comfortable. But yeah. So yeah, share some humor that landed well, if you remember anything from past keynotes or anywhere? Would love to hear.
The last keynote was it was just a lot of fun. It was on a Sunday. It was the Club World Cup final, and that the opening statement that I made off of the presentation was like, "Thank you for spending time here instead of watching the last 30 minutes of the game," which just like was thankfully the audience had a lot of people who followed football/soccer, but it just immediately set the tone. Right? Like this is not going to be one of those like, look at me, how amazing this is, and pay attention. It's going to be a freewheeling sort of conversation. The best ones have been where like there's been some sort of a malfunction, like the TV doesn't work or the mic is screeching. And because it just allows you to riff and people can understand that you're still trying to serve the audience, even though this technical malfunction is like not your fault.
Tell me more about it.
Well, it's just that I'd gone down on the stage and I was walking with the audience because that was the only way the distance between the speakers would work enough. So you don't have a continuous kind of screeching sound. And just the kind of general value and belief has been like, you have to show the good and the bad. So when we did the redesign as an example, we had a lot of positive feedback, like overwhelmingly so, but we also had a bunch of negative feedback. So just like showcasing the tweets or the posts that we had from people, just like to contextualize that not everything was easy or was roses. Like it took some time to get it right. It just humanizes and it helps you build yourself as like, hey, you've gone through this. It helps set your own hero's journey. And like it was not done for you. You figured it.
Yeah, it helps to build the trust by keeping things real.
That's right.
So talking about trust, I think it's really important to build a positive professional visibility. What have you done intentionally to cultivate that?
It's basically the same sort of rules, right? Like where do not punch down, not be like the angry kind of customer service person, or do not be the angry caller into it. A lot of it is like lifting people up. If you see something positive, you're like, hey, this is great. Or here's a way in which this thing has changed how I do my sort of day to day. I think most recently it was the sort of Perplexity experience or the integrations we've done with Databricks as an example. It was such a game changer. It was so helpful that I believed in it, and it was just an authentic thing to go share. So giving kudos where they're worth and making sure that you are broadcasting the sort of positive, because I think there's enough negativity everywhere.
Switching gears a bit, tell me what's the biggest misconception about building professional visibility you might have faced on your own?
I think a lot of it is people think there's only one way to do it right.
Mm-hmm.
If you follow this recipe, you'll have a brand that people are proud of. And I think if you follow somebody else's recipe, sure, you might have a great brand, but it's just your brand, right? Like, and you're going to get tired of doing that. It's going to be another job in addition to the job you already have.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's much more preferable to be authentic to yourself and have the belief that there's some audience there that finds this useful/meaningful. Yeah.
Creating your own path, finding your own ways is the takeaway.
Yeah, like if you go back to like controlling your inputs, right? Like you have to show up. If it feels like a chore, then you're not going to show up, or it at least won't be fun, or you're not going to do the best job. So it's best to not. It's best to be like what feels natural and authentic, and that you can keep doing. So, like, feels pretty important.
I agree. If it's not fun, then you're not going to be consistent, and consistency and persistence is one of the key things.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. So are you introvert, extrovert, ambivert?
I definitely more sort of introverted. I'm extroverted. I can't do more than one event a week where you're mingling and you're trying to learn from the others. It's the battery discharges very, very quickly. But from a team perspective, right, like it's just a different sort of energy. But yes, very much more introverted.
Interesting. Because I think introverts and extroverts approach building visibility in different ways. And usually people think somebody who's extrovert would naturally be more visible. You've shared your side of the things. How did you navigate this journey of really showing up? One, because as I understand, introverts get drained by doing too much. So
Yeah.
how did you manage that?
There was a time where I was out probably like 3 or 4 times a week, just doing all the different events and you just need to create space and time for yourself. Because the weekends are with the kids, the weekdays there's stuff at work, and then the evenings become these events. You just have to carve out time. Like if you don't carve out time, you're just not gonna be even if you show up to 3 or 4 things a week, you're not going to have fun. And it's probably not the best version of you that you see. And the other thing is just spiking, where you're like, this week's a wash, and there's a conference or something, you just roll with it, right? And that helps because you can compensate in the other weeks where we're like, I'm just not doing anything. I'm just staying at home and reading a book.
That's a good point. So, okay, tell me what's next coming for you on your journey.
For me, I continue to get a lot of value out of talking to people about the work that I've done if they are on a journey that's similar. So it's a large brand that's trying to figure out what is my AI story. Like that just feels a very natural place to go help others with, to talk about it, to go sort of write about it, to have an understanding of like lessons learned. And doing it repeatedly for like different audiences. So I did that for the CPO group that I'm part of. I did that for the company. I did that for the other sort of firms that I also work with. It just like every time you do, you have a different learning because people are like, in the time that you did it, these things have now become better. So what's the way that you would look at it? And just like having a continuous, I look at it as a live, continuously updating book, which keeps getting recapped over time, because this is a journey that a lot of companies will go through. How are you leaving your markets? So like that one. And two is just like helping teams grow. Like there's a lot of value with sort of mentorship and people who just don't have the opportunities or are stuck in their own ways. I find a lot of joy in helping folks there.
Sounds interesting. You have mentioned about AI a couple of times. How AI is going to help somebody, if you have any thoughts to build more visibility? Definitely content production is very easy. The bar is low, but I think that negatively impacts because if everything is same, how are you able to stand out? It actually creates problem for somebody who really has the talent. But what are your thoughts? How can somebody leverage it?
There's more garbage. So, but barrier to entry is super low, right?
Yeah.
But I think how people can help is to find the people who are just starting out, right? Where we're like, hey, I want to talk about this great project that I did that helps this great sort of audience. It can help them figure out like, what do you do? Where do you go? Where does your community live? It could very well be that for somebody who was doing DevOps work, you don't go to LinkedIn, you don't go to Discord, you go to Reddit. And I think that amount of understanding is what like these kind of deep research agents are extremely, extremely good at. So I think that's an area that is being slept on, but I think it's a pretty critical way that people can leverage it to go at least start to build their professional visibility. Because not everybody needs to be a top 10 voice or what have you. Like you just have to find your group and your audience, and it has to be a mutually beneficial relationship. It's not just you're talking at them, you're talking to them.
That's really interesting to not actually create content, but to find the surface and maybe finding your audience. Do you use it in content creation?
Yeah.
Any way differently that you use it that maybe some others may not?
The most interesting way that I've done it has been there's just like thoughts, philosophies, and principles, but it used to take forever to do any kind of data analysis. But now that's like done like this, like if you use Claude or Gemini or kind of whatever. And so like it's very easy to overlay the data and then say things like, hey, this is how we have looked at. Like if you looked at the number of tickets that we solved, like overlaying that with the new feature we released and overlaying that with this is the internal utilization of AI, is now like a 30-minute thing instead of it taking weeks and weeks for somebody to do analysis. And for the personal visibility thing, it could be here's how I helped, here is what I have been hearing, and here are like the macro trends that I can then analyze. It helps make your posts or your thoughts a lot more grounded. So like just integrating data into writing, I think has become like very interesting in my mind, and it's very easy to do.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
What are the books that you would recommend our audience that could help them in their journey to build more visibility, bring more happiness to their life, professional life?
So there's a 48 rules of power.
48.
I think that's it. It's by Professor Pfeffer, who's at Stanford. It is fascinating how things are sort of written. Anything in his series is actually a great read because you just understand how the zeitgeist kind of thinks about it. If people like how kind of brands are built, there's this amazing story about how reality TV came into being. So it was all about like the visibility that radio got, which then went to TV, which then went to program television. It's called Cue the Sun, which is the thing that I'm reading right now. And then beyond that, there's obviously
Can you
like
share more about this? I would love to know how this whole thing came in.
so the book started with like how Candid Camera came into being, originally a radio show. And it talks about the evolution from like syndication to a radio to an actual show, and just the evolution of how people liked being shown it. So it was like, hey, people did not like being made fun of, but at the end, when people say, hey, you're on Candid Camera, it diffused the entire situation. People started laughing, and then that's when the ratings really, really plunged up, which was just a fascinating way how like both consumer psychology and like trends work. So you have to have some kind of non-obvious insight, right? And I think that goes towards creating visibility as well. Like you can't just be shouting louder, right? Like having an ad that talks about the same stuff that everyone else is. You have to have some non-obvious insight that helps people. That is the thing that people are curious about, and it's what makes people keep coming back to you. So like that's the framing I would use.
And any favorite podcasts where maybe you are participant, like you are either present or you're just listening, either would work.
Dan Turchin has a podcast which I really quite like. It's about more AI societal stuff, which is great. Grace, who does the venture podcast, she's great. Like just she's just an exemplar of like showing up. Like she will do these every day, and I'm just like,
Every day?
every day.
Oh, that's a commitment.
She has a LinkedIn Live, which is awesome. There's the Economist podcast, which I find quite interesting, but that's pretty much it.
Okay, thanks for sharing. I think those are really cool ones. Any quotes that resonate with you that you would like others to know?
So my kids are into Bluey, and then there's a lot of like, the thing that I like the most is there's this quote by, I think it's the mom. She says, you have to run your own race. And I think that's the most applicable thing if you are trying to build business. Like if you're trying to chase what somebody else has done, you are going to have a bad time because now you have signed up for more work that you may not like. So I think just like trying to figure out ways to run your own race instead of trying to go mimic someone else is like a standout that I use all the time, at least.
So theoretically, many people will resonate. Do you have any personal examples where have you seen that, that it is bound to fail? Anything from like that maybe that can help to reaffirm this mindset in our audience and everyone around?
I think a lot of individuals, I've seen this before, but like you would get on a 6-month tear, you would post every single day, you create professional visibility, you would have people coming in, you would do press tours, you would do all of that, but then you just fall off a cliff because there wasn't conviction behind it. And then you're right back to where you started, because professional visibility has like a decay function to it, right? Like it doesn't always come up. You have to invest in it to keep coming, and to have these like increasing orders of investment, you have to like what you're doing. And so that's like the kind of, I'm sure we've seen plenty of people who have started strong and then kind of petered out. That's why.
Yeah, I think it goes beyond visibility in life in general as well, for anything. Yeah. Cool. Thanks for sharing your insights and energy. Yeah, I totally thoroughly enjoyed knowing you more.
That was fascinating. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. This podcast is an original production of Women in Product. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the Women in Product YouTube channel. Leave us a review so that others can discover us, or share this episode with others. Original music provided by Jimmy Hahn.